Central Illinois residents continue mounting their opposition to a CO2 pipeline and a new pipeline being proposed. Welcome back. It's Springfield's Morning News. I'm Greg Bishop on 92.7 WMAY, Springfield's News and Talk. If you drive through some of the rural areas of Springfield, you'll see signs that say neighbors supporting neighbors against CO2 pipelines. And this is obviously something that, has got a lot of attention, especially through these counties that the pipelines are being proposed for. But I talked with Kathleen Campbell, who we've heard from before, to get the latest of where we're at with the latest pipelines, and that includes another pipeline being applied for. So we already have the Navigator Heartland Greenway project that's being proposed, and that was filed earlier this year, or early last year, and then was withdrawn earlier this year and refiled earlier this year. We have another one that's being filed and proposed as well. But you have opposition coalescing together with residents in the area, but also even staff from the ICC. So here's Kathleen Campbell talking about where we're at with all of this when it comes to pipelines being proposed through Central Illinois.
Sure. There is, as you probably know, the plan is that in the United States, they could run up to 66 to 65,000 miles of these CO2 pipelines in the United States. And a lot of them would end up dumping all of that toxic and hazardous waste CO2 in Illinois. So we just got our second one filed on Friday, and that is by the Wolf ADM pipeline. And they plan to have pickups at 2 ethanol plants in Iowa and 1 in Illinois, and then run it down for sequestration down by Macon. So, and Decatur. So now we have another concern. So the good thing is that originally they planned to have a spur through Peoria, right through a housing district, right by churches and schools and everything else. And they have taken off that spur for now, but they have said that they may revise later and expand. So fortunately, I think due to the public opposition that they've taken off that spur, but we still have a lot of concerns about these pipelines. You know, they're dangerous. They haven't done much public education, because they said they wanted to wait till they filed at the ICC. So we need to learn a lot more about this pipeline, but it's still going to be a big one. It's going to be a 20-inch diameter pipe, and they want to sequester up to 12 million megatons annually. And they use the Decatur site for ADM as an example, but the Decatur site has only sequestered 3.5 million megatons in the last 11 years. So by proportion, that's not really a good proof of concept for something this large.
So again, Kathleen Campbell here talking about where we're at with the process of opposing these pipelines. She says the opposition continues to grow. More from Kathleen in my conversation with her yesterday.
So now we've got the Navigator Pipeline, which is a huge issue. I'd love to update you on that. There's so much happening with the Navigator Pipeline. So for the ADM, we're going to have to wait and see a little bit about their application and their public hearings on this and how they're handling setbacks, which we don't know yet. So we don't have a lot of information other than they have filed and they plan to do it.
Now, some of the questions continue to be, what's really the rationale here, right? I mean, the idea is to take industrial CO2 waste from ethanol and other manufacturing facilities, transfer it via pipeline hundreds of miles across several states, and bury it deep in the ground in Illinois. I hear that this could be used for future energy projects, or it could help save the environment from CO2. Kathleen Campbell reacts.
Well, it's a false solution. What they want to do is promote the fossil fuel industry. The minute that this infrastructure bill was passed for CO2 pipelines, Joe Manchin came out and talked about how it would save coal, fossil fuel, et cetera. They want to keep using fossil fuel and coal, and then, we'll just take the carbon, and ethanol plants produce CO2 as well. We'll just take the carbon, we'll stick it in the ground, and Illinois, problem solved. But what they don't look at is the danger of this. It's incredibly dangerous. This is so much different than gas and oil pipelines. And they don't look at the efficacy of it. You're still ripping up a lot of prime Illinois farmland that we need to produce food. And then you're putting everyone's lives at risk along the pipeline. What we need to do is stop producing CO2. And we can do that through alternative energy like wind and solar. Now, there's some projects that are happening in Illinois that are very interesting. The question is, we haven't really delved down to determine how green they are.
So that's something else that we'll likely hear a lot more about is possible, alternative energy programs. But to the crux of this issue of transporting concentrated CO2 through pipelines across multiple state lines. I mean, the proposed project for Navigator, 1,350 miles of new pipeline, 4 booster stations, mainline valves for Illinois. It's going to be about 292 miles of pipelines going across all kinds of different counties throughout central Illinois. And that's a lot of pipeline. And you've got questions about whether or not, pipelines are safer than rail and other forms of transporting these types of materials. Campbell says while rail and roads with trucks might be safe for some things, it's not necessarily the case when it comes to CO2 and the deadly cataclysmic events that could happen if a pipeline ruptures.
It's very misleading because they say, oh, it's safer. Well, what they're doing is counting the number of accidents. Okay, if you're going to have more accidents on the road, but those are going to be small accidents, not catastrophic accidents. When these pipelines rupture, you've got a catastrophe as you did in Satartia. And that's the difference. So when they say safer, they're only going by numbers of incidents. But like I say, it's like getting hit with a little hammer in your knee at the physician's office time and again, or getting hit with a 2-ton rock over your head all at once, which is going to do more damage. So the smaller incidences, you're going to have those more frequently, but they're not going to have the catastrophic impact and kill people or hospitalize people with mass casualty events like you can with a pipeline rupture for these.
And I'm sharing a bit of a video that the coalition has on their website showing what a CO2 type of pipeline with this type of low-lying gas does when it bursts, when it erupts. And it's amazing. I mean, of course, there's a huge plume, but it's such a heavy, concentrated, toxic gas that it just spans out. And it's in quick time here, but it still shows how fast it spans out, low to the ground. And the concern is that if you have these types of pipelines rupture, then you're going to have that essentially encapsulate entire neighborhoods, and it could be a big problem. But for the Navigator Pipeline, there's a lot of moving pieces, including an event coming up here in Sangamon County that Kathleen Campbell wants people to be aware of.
Sure. There's a lot happening. Now, on July 17th, Sangamon County is sponsoring an event, much to their credit, at the BOS Convention Center, Bank of Springfield Convention Center in downtown Springfield on July 17th at 5 o'clock. Navigator will be presenting, and those that oppose Navigator will also be presenting. And then there'll be questions from the public, both in favor or opposed. Although I must admit, I loved your WMAY survey before, your daily poll today. It's running 76% against CO2 pipelines and only 24% in favor. So wonderful work there, Greg. But so the opponents and proponents can come down to the BOS Convention Center on July 17th at 5 o'clock, and then they can hear from Navigator and they can hear from the opponents, both sides, and then there'll be a full discussion. So we really thank Sangamon County for sponsoring this event to educate everybody on both sides. Now, the other big thing that's been happening with Navigator is all of our testimonies went into the ICC on Thursday, on July 15th. And they are uniformly negative against Navigator, including the ICC staff. The ICC staff, headed up by Mr. Maples, which we thoroughly present, or appreciate, is already recommending not just dismissal or withdrawal of their application, but denial of it. So that's a pretty strong statement. As you know, Navigator was forced to withdraw their application in January, and then they refiled in February. And of course, they said, "Oh, it's just that we had to expand, et cetera." Actually, they're not proposing to transport any more CO2, but they added extra pipelines because they don't have adequate sequestration sites. But the same issues still hold. So the ICC is certainly concerned about safety, which we appreciate, and they're also concerned about sequestration. And the other thing is that they are now running more and more pipeline hither and yon to find all these different sequestration sites. They won't even tell the ICC where their final sequestration sites are and what their final volume is. So what I describe is this pipeline to nowhere could become the pipeline to everywhere. If this is going to happen, if they think this is a good idea and CO2 has to be sequestered and it has to go through pipelines, then they should have the most efficient routing possible, the least amount of pipeline to damage our farmland and to place lives at risk for the greatest amount of CO2 transported. And that's not what's happening here at all. It's going all over. We could have just a spider web of these pipelines everywhere. So I encourage people to go to the ICC website and read about safety, particularly in ICC filings, but particularly read the ICC staff opinion, which is recommending denial of this pipeline. And also, again, they don't want to see it again. They're saying, which I thoroughly agree with, that Navigator, by withdrawing, reapplying, still not having a good application, still not showing that they have adequate sequestration sites, still not showing they have a reasonable route, should not be able to waste the ICC's time and all of us landowners. It's stressful. It's costing us a lot of money to file these lawsuits and do these interventions and protest and I can't tell you how much time I spend on this, Greg. And it is not fair to the residents and the citizens of Illinois to put us in this position time and time again when they don't have their act together.
So, again, that's Kathleen Campbell, conversation I had with her yesterday. She is just a local citizen that is part of this coalition, the Coalition to Stop CO2 Pipelines. And if you go to their website, you can find out more. And the website is noillinoisco2pipelines.org. noillinoisco2pipelines.org. You can get a whole wealth of information on both of these pipelines that are being proposed here, and all of the science that's involved, and links to the ICC websites where you can see the opposition, and even more. So a lot of things happening when it comes to the proposed pipelines across central Illinois. It is Springfield's Morning News. I'm Greg Bishop on 92.7 WMAY, Springfield's News and